All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Train the Trainer podcast. Tiger, take us away.
All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is a concept of easy versus hard. So kind of deciphering what is easy, what is hard, what does that look like in the short term, what does that look like in the long term. We did a podcast a while back where we kind of went through and talked about all the bad parts about personal training. And that kind of inspired this a little bit because there are some hard parts about our career, if you will. But we're going to talk about why we think that's a good thing, how we can leverage that. And so I think one of the first things we can talk about is like, what is the hard part of personal training, at least in the short term, right?
There's several hard aspects of the job, if you will, but in my mind, a lot of those hard aspects is what makes it worthwhile and also provides separation for those that really want to make this into a career, right? They're not just looking for something easy that they can do until they find another job down the road, right? So, seasonally, we were talking about this earlier today. So at the time of putting this podcast together, right, we just came out of first quarter, right? First quarter of the year being January, February, March, which is always the easiest time of the year in the fitness industry as far as for new business, new influx of business coming in. You just kind of sit on your heels and essentially be handed new clients, right? Mm-hmm. You don't really need to motivate anybody. You don't need to get them excited about taking charge of their health. They're just kind of they're coming in.
They got the New Year's resolutions going. Yeah. Summer's coming, so they want to look good, and
there's that false sense of security that can come with that. It reminds me of that saying, right? Or I know at this point it's become an internet meme where easy times create weak men, right? Mm-hmm. Weak women, and then weak men, weak women create hard times, right? Typically we let our foot off the gas, and then it creates a very much more challenging second quarter and third quarter, right? A hard time, if you will. And then hopefully, right, we can strengthen ourselves up to lean into those hard times. And I know that you're going to talk about that, but leaning into those hard times so that we can create even better times in the future again.
Well, it creates a sense of urgency. when we look at like a pain versus pleasure matrix, people are a lot more successful running away from pain. And so sometimes feeling some of that pain, if you will, like feeling your business slow down or dry out a little bit or even go backwards sometimes is the thing that you almost need to motivate you to go further forward, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of the commonalities as far as what's hard about the job that you hear people talk about is the fact that we work long hours or clients not showing up for appointments, clients complaining in session, having to sit down and make contacts and call people. These are all things that we consider at least hard in the short term because they're not as fun as maybe some of our alternative options like taking naps or playing video games, etc. Right? And so one thing that we're going to talk about when we're going over this too is we're going to talk about seeking hard, because you have to begin to understand how hard leverages you to be more successful in the future. That saying is obviously a good point. But when we're looking at short-term hard versus short-term easy, what does that look like for you?
For me personally, or for training?
What do you visualize?
For sure. When I think of, in thinking about impulse control, right, where I could choose something that could maybe give me an easier but lesser result now, as opposed to maybe hold off, right, and have a greater result in the future, right? So for instance, I'm trying to think of a good example. I wasn't prepared for that question.
So the one that I always point to, and this is something I just do personally, for myself, but in relation to alcohol consumption is usually where I kind of
that's a
do
good one.
this, and it's a small version of practicing more than anything, because I don't necessarily know that me drinking on the weekends would change my performance in the club. However, I think it's just something I do out of practice sake, where during the week I have a rule I will not drink during the week. I also usually abstain from drinking during the weekends unless there's some sort of celebration, or if I'm going to a big event, a big social event. Those are the times where maybe I'll actually go ahead and consume the alcohol, or if I'm on vacation, I'll drink alcohol. Mm-hmm. But it makes the reward that much greater.
Yep.
Right. And so it's although it's hard in the short term, because some people go home and they drink every day, and it might be hard to abstain from that, but I also understand that me making that hard decision every day allows me to wake up in the morning and feel awake and ready to go. Mm-hmm. It allows me to knock out any computer work I need to do at home when I'm at home after my long day of work. And it just kind of keeps me a little bit more accountable to that idea of like, no, I don't need every little indulgence in life. Like I can abstain myself and realize I'm going to get something great on the other end.
And the greater that reward or success that you're seeking, the greater the price, if you will, right? That most people won't be willing to pay in order to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the most challenging part about not drinking during the week, I'd say, or on the weekend, or for me, it's been years at this point, is the social right piece of that, right? The pressure from other individuals that don't understand it because they have different goals than you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that could be one of the hardest pieces about personal training is that it's by nature entrepreneurial. Like it's about pushing. It's about driving. If it is to be, it's up to us in order to put in the work and put in the input. It can't be something that's just given to us, right? So the more sacrifices that we make early on, right, the greater the payout down the road. But a lot of people aren't willing to do that, right? They expect it to come easier, right? And then unfortunately they leave the business. It's the same thing with getting in shape, right? Those that expect it to be hard and are willing to do the hard things necessary to achieve success are the ones that can find success in fitness and changing their body and changing their lifestyle. Those that expect it to be easy, right? I just need to follow some easy, quick fix diet plan or workout plan. Those are the ones that don't get there.
Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with a client on this the other day, and Alex Ramosi has like another great story about this where he's talking about his fraternity that he was in. So I kind of stole it from him. But my client Erin has like made a ton of progress, and she's been probably one of the most successful clients I've had over the last 6 months. But she's been sick recently, and she's had a lot of like life stuff come up where she's kind of been out of the gym and then back in, and all this other stuff's going on, and she still wants to be losing weight. And I finally I just looked at her. I'm like, look, Erin, like when we started this, you didn't expect everything in your life to just go perfectly so you could focus on this, right? Like you expected this to be kind of hard, right? And she's like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, that's what this feels like. And she kind of like looked at me a little bit and she was like, she called me I'll blurb the word, but she was kind of talking tongue in cheek, but she understood like, you know what, you're right. Like this is what I should be feeling. Of course I want to go eat food because I'm stressed out and like I want to go eat whatever I want and I want to go indulge and stuff. But this is what I expected. This is what I signed up for. And I know what I'm going to get on the other end. And so she like recommitted herself. And she's down, I think, another 4 pounds in the last 2 weeks since we had this conversation.
That's awesome.
Which is really cool.
Yep.
And so she's 6 pounds away from getting a cheeseburger, I believe. So we have a little bit of a deal going on right now. But it's those little things. And it's cool because you can take those little stacks, like the small examples about alcohol or Erin with getting the cheeseburger that she wants. Mm-hmm. You can take those little things as like best practice and you can apply them to like some much bigger picture life issues when you're talking about like investing for retirement. Mm-hmm. You're talking about maybe your relationship as far as like with your spouse, or you're talking about your, like spending time with your kids, where it's like there might be some times where you have to sacrifice that time where you don't get to see your kids as much or you don't get to see your spouse as much. But knowing that you're doing that in order to get like a long-term return, you know, where you can retire or when you get like higher up in your career as a personal trainer and you can take time off and you don't have to worry about paying your bills, that's when you really get to see like the fruits of your labor and you get to spend more time with your family or go on those cool vacations and do X, Y, and Z.
Yep. The heart is what makes it worthwhile. It's what makes it sweeter, right? If it was just easy, it'd be something that we could take for granted, right? And it's probably something that wouldn't end up becoming permanent. It probably wouldn't be something that would be, when you recognize it and see it in somebody else, right? You see somebody that's put a lot of effort into their body, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. We admire the discipline because we knew how hard it was to get to that point, right? Or someone that has acquired wealth or whatnot, right? We aspire to those things because we know that it's a challenge. It doesn't just come easy, right? It doesn't just come naturally for a lot of people. It's something that was required to be worked for, and that's what's good, right? I know we say that often in the gym, like, oh, like this is where it's gotten hard, like good. Now I have an opportunity to actually improve. Where when things were easy, I didn't have to improve, right? I could just stay the same. I could just reap what hopefully I've sown from past efforts, right? But I'm just sitting there like collecting harvest, if you will, where it's in the planting seasons that I think is we call it separation season, but it's what allows people to become the next best version of themselves.
And I've had a lot of like trainers in our club recently because we just brought on a bunch of new guys where like they'll say something to me about like, oh, like this is hard, like this business is not easy, like this is hard. And I always almost smile every time I hear it because I've gotten to the point now where I'm not going to say that it's easy. And that's like a whole nother thing we can talk about. But like, I understand where they're at, you know, like I get it. That first feeling of like, dang, this sucks. And I'm like, you don't even know yet, man.
Right.
This is actually the easy part. Wait until like you're too busy to make contacts and your business isn't growing. And then it's a whole different mess because you have to figure out a bunch of different problems. But as you like seek out these hardships or you look for these like little small places where you can sacrifice that short-term easy, like the alcohol, for example, you like build your own, what's the word? I guess like resilience.
Discipline.
And your discipline comes up and it like gets easier to overcome the hard.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's like a beautiful thing is like this career almost does it for you. And so like as you're pushing through those little hard spots, like you're becoming a tougher character and you're getting even better as a trainer too, because we all know like when we're in our own personal downslopes, like our training quality falls, right? But at the same time, the more you're going through them, the stronger you're going to be. And then you can always deliver back to your clients at a level that they're not going to understand because they might not be like feeling those same hardships.
It's definitely like building a muscle. I mean, the temptation does seem to like decrease for those short-term instant gratifications, the going home and taking a nap in the middle of the day, right? The just general fatigue, right? You build up resistance to that for sure. I love when trainers like that are brand new come to me and like, man, this is harder than I thought. I'm like, isn't it awesome that not everybody can do this, right? Like it almost becomes a point of pride. The same thing for people that have put a lot of effort into their physical fitness, right? They have a sense of pride and a sense of identity, right? It's so much easier to turn away the chocolate cake at Thanksgiving, right? When everybody expects you to. Oh yeah, he's the disciplined one, right? The peer pressure goes away.
Yeah, what
right?
are you one of those fitness freaks?
Yeah, what are you one of those? Watch that scene from The Departed. But yeah, it becomes easier as you go. Relatively, you look forward to doing the hard things, and then you just find more hard things to challenge yourself, right? And that's where, I mean, you have nonstop evolution. I know David Goggins talks about doing that all the time, right? I mean, in business, maybe we don't always want to just seek hard for hard's sake, right? Maybe we tackle that in exclusively our physical challenges, right? We don't want to make the business harder than it needs to be just because. But I think there is benefit and virtue in always trying to grow in some capacity, but working hard and smart at the same time.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest ways that our owner, the owner of our company, frames it is he talks about zombie hunting, which is kind of like I know that it's framed as like problem identification, right? Where it's like, I'm going to see a problem a million miles away and solve it now. That's no different than seeking the hard now. A lot of times, like in our own personal lives, or we'll see our clients do it where it's like they have a problem, but they don't want to face that problem yet, right? So like I'll have clients that they're eating really bad, but they don't want to talk to me about nutrition, right? Until it's too late, until they've paid for 6 months of training and they haven't made any progress. And then they're like, Tiger, you never helped me with my nutrition. I'm like, I asked you about it like every week. You said, hey, we'll talk about it next week. I'm going through some stuff, you know? And so we push these problems off. And I mean, our owner, Rodney, he says like, no, you should actively be zombie hunting, looking for problems to solve, solving them before they like become too big, or solving them before like they've already burned you. And I think that's
100%.
an important way to like live life, where you're like living by design, where it's all the issues that you see like forthcoming, you can tackle immediately.
Yep. And we say that again often, and we kind of have these mantras that we use in our club and with our teams, but problems prolonged become problems multiplied, right? If we don't go out, I think Jordan Peterson talks about that, but going out and trying to kill the dragon in its lair, as opposed to just waiting for it to come and burn your village, right? If in business, right, if you're tolerating something that's substandard, right, and waiting until it comes to a head, to Tiger's point, it may be too late, right? Or think about all the lost opportunity that you could have had in solving that problem sooner, right?
Yeah.
And not having the blow to your confidence or the blow to your, identity and self-concept about yourself. Seeking those opportunities to grow quickly, right? Leaning into the hard before it's necessary will make things far easier in the long run.
Yeah. And if we want to like apply that to a direct example with training, it could be something as simple as like doing your hair in the morning, where it's something I didn't do for a very long time, as I would just kind of like ruffle into work and my hair was kind of messed up a little bit or whatever. You have trainers throw a hat on and they're like, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And it's like, eventually that very well could be like the limiting factor in your business.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about how many clients that are probably high end, long-term, high frequency, high paying training clients have you lost just because of a lack of professionalism for wearing a hat to work?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that stings when you think about the lifetime of a client that could train for 4, 5, 6 years. You just lost tens of thousands of dollars because you wanted to wear a hat to work. But,
100%.
yeah, but people don't want to think about that, you know. It's a lot easier to take that short term, like, let me just, you know, put the hat on. And you see that in so many other like walks of life where that short term gratification burns you completely from something that could be, I mean, lifelong.
Yeah, just stroking the ego and staying comfortable as opposed to trying to expand and be more and be the best version of yourself. Another analogy I thought about with training is how often we try to work with somebody around a movement issue, right? Like they have a knee issue, right? The way that they walk is slightly altered, not good, right? Not to go into any too specific examples, where we know with given enough repetition, that person's like gunning for a knee replacement or a hip replacement. And you advise this person, and they don't heed any of it. And eventually they have to go see their doctor and they're like, oh yeah, you need a knee replacement. And they're like, shoot, right?
Why was I working with that personal trainer?
If only I would have, yeah. It's often people that we don't work with. That's right.
Yeah.
The meatheads in the gym, we point out movement deviations too. But 100%. If that person would have leaned into the discomfort of asking for help sooner, right? Leaned into that discomfort short term of possibly needing to invest in themselves, right? I'd rather pay for the help now, right? If I was in their issue, than have to pay for the catastrophic recovery later, right? What's that? An ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. Or something like that. Maybe it's vice versa, right? But essentially, if we tackle what seems hard now, right, and don't just look for the easy out, it typically leads to greater returns in the long run.
And of course, I mean, we talked about this earlier today when we were discussing this. There is like a balance there, right? Where there are like moments to, I'm not going to say take the easy route, but there's moments to like indulge, if you will, and maybe separate yourself from some of that hardship. I know you mentioned like an 80% rule, 80-20.
Yep. So the analogy, I forget who I had first heard this from. It might have been Chris Williamson, or it might have been Alex Ramosi. I don't know. so many of the guys on the internet these days. But the old study that everybody's aware of, where you give the child the choice of delaying gratification around having a cookie, right? If you can delay gratification, if you can wait an hour, right, then you get 2 cookies, right? Imagine if you played that game out, right, where if you wait a day, you get 4 cookies. If you wait a week, you get 5 cookies, right? At what point is it no longer reasonable to delay out gratification and then never experience, never to indulge, right? Or never to experience the fruits of your waiting, right? The fruits of your labor, right? You can't just sow seeds and then never harvest, right? So in that analogy, again, I forget who shared this story, but they had the magic ratio at being an 80% giver, right? Or an 80% sower, and then 20% reaping, right? Or 20% harvesting. Because the individuals that solely just give, right? And just are solely receiving, they never receive any harvest. They just get walked all over, right? They never get any ROI. And then the individuals that are solely just trying to take from everybody and only harvest, and they never sow in anything, right? They just expect to be taken care of, right? They're the ones that are like, well, why can't, as a personal trainer, why can't my company just pay me a base salary of $50,000 a year and not actually train anybody, right? Or not actually really push? Why can't I just be a career floor trainer, right? That's obviously not going to get you anywhere either, right? And no one's really probably going to like that individual.
Well, the worst part about that too is like when you're talking about 80% and 20%, if you're an 80% taker, your pot that you're taking 80% of is often much, much smaller, right? If you're somebody who's giving and providing, and you're providing and giving 80%, your pot is so much bigger that 20% that you receive is often greater than the 80% the person that's just taking receives. And so it's much more like worthwhile to focus on the giving side of things. And I think like another thing that I know that I personally walk myself through, or at least try to, is like, if I'm going to indulge, right? If I know that is in like coming, right? I'm going to look for something that's like leveraged, right? To where like, it'll only fire me up more and excite me more when I come back from whatever it is that I did to
Mhm.
push the needle even harder. Right? Like I want to come back. Let's say I take a vacation. I want to come back from vacation and be like so motivated to work that it's almost like I never even took one. If anything, the vacation was like a net positive, or it was profitable, you know?
Yep. And I think that you do a great job of this, Tiger. I'm going to use, I mean, you as a personal example. Even before you go on vacation, right? You spend like 3 months trying to create so much surplus that it's not even like it's not hitting you.
Well, that
right?
was the other thing I was going to go into too is like, if I know one's coming, it's like I'm going to abstain from every possible route of like indulging because I know that a big one's coming. And it's like when that goalpost is relatively close, it's like you don't need to drink on the weekends if you know you're going to Mexico in 3 months. You don't need to. It's like I can just wait and push and push, and it's like it only allows you to provide so much more back to everybody else too. It's something that I like worry about too. Is like in this business, if you're gone for a week, I'm like, man, I don't want my clients to just be like screwed over for a week, if you will, right? But if I'm like absolutely killing myself every day at work, then my clients are like, dude, you need to go on vacation. They're like, go. And so like right now, a lot of my clients are telling me like, dude, you need to go do something. And so like that is kind of nice, like where you can kind of, I guess, reinforce it to them and back to everybody else that you're providing to, that like you're earning the thing that you're getting.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you. So as a high performer and as a high producer, I was just advising a couple other high performing individuals earlier this week on this same thing, right? When you have clients, because they're going to tell this to you, or family members or loved ones, right, tell you to work less hard, right, or to push less, right, or to indulge more. How have you found yourself being able to respond to that and not just, I mean,
go do crazy stuff? Yeah.
Right.
So, okay, you have to analyze who the information's coming from, first of all, right? Because some of your clients, candidly, might have a lower threshold than you do when it comes to, I mean, pushing the needle on something or delaying your own gratification. Some clients might be able to take vacations every month or something, and like that's their threshold, if you will, as far as work. Other clients that maybe are like a little bit more successful in their careers or have done a little bit better, might be more like, hey, Tiger, like you need to stay and work longer. Like, do you really think you need to go somewhere right now? And so understanding where that advice is coming from, or like who's giving you that advice, is always like best practice. It's not just, oh, because so-and-so said it, I'm going to do it. It's like, well, who is so-and-so? Because if so-and-so, I'm not talking about any of my clients right now, but let's say that so-and-so is kind of a loser. Like, I'm not going to take their advice. Like, I want to take the advice from the guy who's owns like one of the largest companies in the entire Midwest. Like, that's the guy's advice that I want to take on. And you got to look to your leaders as well. When I was in Colorado with, you were with us, right? But we had, Rodney took a bunch of our employees that had like won a competition out to Colorado for a ski trip. And I kind of got a second to separate myself from the rest of the group and talk to him one-on-one. And I kind of asked him, I'm like, hey, Rodney, like, how do you balance life with like your family, I mean, your wife, your kids, et cetera, and then your work? Because like you're working all the time. And he told me that you need to play just as hard as you work. And I always thought that was like good, where it's like the energy is not limited. Like you just are pushing on both sides of the front and you don't have to worry so much about it.
Mm-hmm. And I know we've done several podcasts, I think, at this point about work-life balance, but I think that was great, like a great message or great feedback. Is you have to make sure that you consider the source, and then also understand what their intentions are for telling you that. Most people aren't maliciously trying to bring you down, or at least I feel that way with family and loved ones, right? They're just looking out for what they feel is your best interest.
Yeah, sometimes. And I think sometimes subconsciously you see people try to like absolve their own egos, if you will, where they might see that you're working 80 hours a week and they're only working 40. And so because they're only working 40, they might feel a little bit insecure about how many hours you're putting in. So they want you to take a vacation, or they want you to take time off or take your foot off the gas pedal because it makes them feel better about how many hours they're doing. When I realize that that's happening, it almost makes me want to step on the gas pedal a lot harder.
Yeah.
Because I realize that over a long enough time span, what's going to happen is that person's not going to like begin to resent me. They're going to realize they can do 50 hours. Yeah. They're going to realize they can do 60 hours, or they can push harder in their own life.
That's where that pride and that sense of identity can come from. Like, there's not many people that can do this, right? It is a hard profession, right? That's what makes it worthwhile in our eyes. one other piece of advice that I gave those two individuals that I was speaking to earlier in the week, in their case, it was peers telling them to not work hard, right? It's very rare, right, in those scenarios where I think the intention is more absolving the ego, to use the language you use, Tiger, where it's rarely someone that is, let's say, above you, like in an organization, professionally, etc., that's going to be telling you to do less, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might be telling you how to get more leverage, how to work smarter. Where people that might not be doing as much as you, right, they're going to try to bring you back to their level, right? Oh, work less, right? One of the individuals I was coaching, she heard from a peer, right, in a similar position in another club. Oh, you're working way too much, right? I'm surprised you go in that early, right? You should go in later, right? And so this individual was asking me, like, is that person winning? Are they successful? And I'm like, not to the degree that you are, right? So don't listen to it. Stay the course.
And it might not be the degree that you want to be either. Somebody might be in a better position than you and not be working as hard. Fine. If I want more than what they have, like I want more out of life, or I want to like achieve more than what they've achieved, then I can't look at where they're at as like my benchmark for my own work ethic. I want to look at like, where do I want to be? Okay, what is the work requirement for me to get there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can't just look at where people, because other people are going to be in different seasons of their life. They might be ahead of you just because they started earlier.
Right. If it's a client, they might be decades ahead of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or in a completely different physical condition, right? You expect somebody, right? Let's say even like a contemporary, the same age group, but they're 50 pounds more overweight. Do you think that they're going to have the capacity for work? I know that sounds, that doesn't sound great, right? But as a fitness professional, right, we have the capacity to do so much and then still play hard outside of the gym,
Mm-hmm.
right? Outside of work, right? We have the capacity to live a full 168-hour life, and hopefully we can deliver that same capacity to our clients too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And I think sometimes like we gotta get like some pushback where people are like, you guys always want everyone to work harder, work harder, work harder, work harder. And at the end of the day, like if we're following the 80%, 20% rule, like 80% of the time what's coming out of my mouth should be like, you should work harder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just candidly, that's how it should be. And then that other 20% of the time will be the time where I just let you off the hook when you tell me, hey, I'm going to go do something outside of work, or I'm going to go do something that's really not worthwhile.
Yeah.
You know? So
80% invest, 20% return.
yeah.
Right?
And as I would say, like, this sounds bad, but I mean, top performers like in the field that work with other trainers and work with other people and coach them on how to be successful, it's in our best interest to like influence you on the like the rules and the principles and values that have gotten us to where we are, because we only know that that's going to yield you the same return.
100%, right? It only benefits all of us for everybody to lean into that hard and get a greater ROI in this industry.
Yeah, kind of a concept, if you will, that's not directly related to personal training, something you can apply to everything. But I think in our personal training space where things are kind of hard, it's a great topic to talk about and something to just like remind yourself of every now and then as you're moving through some of those hard seasons like we're entering right now, moving into May.
Yeah, it's winter is coming, right? Good, right?
Good.
Opportunity to improve. All right, guys, thanks.